Dominion voting system has been called into question and the fact checkers are back. This time Reuters has decided to join the facade and put their opinions out there on Dominion and how it is not linked to Smartmatic. They say here, fact check. Dominion is not linked to Smartmatic, Antifa, or Venezuela. Did not switch U.S. 2020 election votes in Virginia and was not subject to a U.S. raid in Germany. Now, the other parts of that I don't necessarily need to talk about. However, this rabbit hole truly does go much deeper than I had expected it to. I've spent the past 2 hours searching different types of things, these different people that they list as the owners, and it goes deep. I was a bit skeptical at first, I'll be honest. I really didn't think that there would be too much to this side of the story, however, there truly is. It says here, the video claims that Dominion used Smartmatic software and that Dominion is a front company for Smartmatic. Samira Saba, communicators director for Smartmatic, told Reuters via email for a previous fact check. Smartmatic has never owned any shares or had any financial stake in Dominion voting systems. Smartmatic has never provided Dominion voting systems with any software, hardware, or technology. Now, here shortly you will see exactly why that statement may be true at face value. However, they're still putting on the facade because that is not exactly true, and these companies are definitely very closely linked. Much more than obviously they would like to admit. They claim here 2 of Smartmatic's founders, Antonio Mujica and Roger Pinate, who continue to run the company as CEO and president, are from Venezuela, but the company was founded in Florida, incorporated in the United States, and now has its headquarters in London, UK. Smartmatic confirms on its website that the company is not Venezuelan, adding, Smartmatic has no ties to governments or political parties from any country. Now, I find that to be kind of funny because here on the Wikipedia page, if you go to Smartmatic's founding, in 1997, 3 engineers, Antonio Mujica, Alfredo Jose Anzalo, and Roger Pinate. There's a third person there, right? They didn't mention that guy in the last one. I wonder why that is. They only stated there were 2 founders. Began collaborating in a group while working at Pana Group Corp in Caracas, Venezuela. Following the 2000 United States presidential election and its hanging Chad controversy in Florida, the group proposed a dedicated system toward election functions. Smartmatic was officially incorporated on 11th April 2000 in Delaware by Alfredo Jose Anzalo, the one person that they mysteriously forgot to mention in the previous article, the third founder that must have slipped under the rug, under the radar. Says Smartmatic then established its headquarters in Boca Raton, Florida, with 7 employees after receiving funds from private investors. The company then began to expand. Private investors decide to give money to a voting system that has no substantial backing at all. No previous history of having any sort of election voting systems in place. It's just a small company with 7 people working there. And oddly enough, Boca Raton, Florida, the southernmost city in Palm Beach, Florida. So the southernmost one, presumably closest to Venezuela. So that way it would be an American company, right? It sort of seems, if you can connect the dots here, that they would do that so that the Venezuelan people would believe, well, an American company is counting our ballots, so it must be true, right? But that's just speculation. Smartmatic was a little-known firm with no experience in voting technology before it was chosen by the Venezuelan authorities to replace the country's elections machinery ahead of a contentious referendum that confirmed Hugo Chavez as president in August 2004. So somehow Chavez gets word of this Smartmatic from Florida, right? And he decides to choose that as the election machinery in a very contentious election. Actually, it's a referendum in which enough people had signed a petition to redo the vote. Before the election, Smartmatic was part of a consortium that included a software company partly owned by a Venezuelan government agency. In March 2005, with a windfall of some $120 million from its first 3 contracts with Venezuela, Smartmatic then bought the much larger and more established Sequoia voting systems, which by 2006 had voting equipment installed in 17 states and the District of Columbia. On August 26, 2005, Sequoia Voting Systems announced that Mr. Jack Blaine would serve in a dual role as president of Sequoia Voting Systems and president of Sequoia's parent company, Smartmatic. So the Sequoia voting system, I thought that was pretty interesting. Would you possibly be able to imagine any correlation between Sequoia and Dominion? Well, there is one, and I'm about to show you. If we go to the Sequoia voting system Wikipedia here, we see, well, this is odd. Sale to Dominion. On June 4, 2010, Dominion Voting Systems, a previously little-known Canadian company, engaged in manufacturing electronic voting hardware and optical scanners, acquired Sequoia Voting System. So you're telling me that there's no correlation between Dominion and Venezuela, yet this Sequoia Voting System was purchased by Dominion, therefore allowing Dominion to take over the Sequoia voting system. And there are even multiple controversies with the systems themselves, and the funniest part, California Secretary of State in 2007 was the one who brought this to the attention. California Secretary of State Deborah Bowen withdrew approval and granted conditional reapproval to Sequoia Voting Systems' optical scan and DRE voting machines after a review of the voting machines certified for use in California in March 2007 found significant security weaknesses throughout the Sequoia system and pervasive structural weakness, which raised serious questions as to whether the Sequoia software can be relied upon to protect the integrity of election. As we know, California happens to be a heavily Democrat state, or I believe it's around like 66% are more left-leaning. And yet even they, back in 2007, were saying there is multiple flaws with this voting system. But not in the present day. Those all went away, right? Even though it's the same software from Sequoia that Smartmatic had made that was then purchased by Dominion. Yes, it goes that deep. We're entering the matrix with this one now. Threat of legal action against Professor Edward Felton. Why would they want to do that? Let's read. In early 2008, New Jersey election officials announced that they planned to send one or more Sequoia Advantage voting machines to Professor Edward Felton and Andrew Apple of Princeton University for analysis. Felton and Apple are computer scientists interested in security issues, especially in regard to electronic voting systems. In March 2008, Sequoia sent an email to Professor Felton asserting that allowing him to examine Sequoia voting machines would violate the license agreement between Sequoia and the county which bought them, and also that Sequoia would take legal action to stop non-compliant analysis, publication of Sequoia software, which, I mean, I could understand that you wouldn't want someone to publish your software, but that is not what they are attempting to do. They are attempting to see if there are structural flaws within the software themselves, or any other infringement of our intellectual property. That's sort of an odd statement to have to make, or an odd legal action to have to take to block someone from reviewing the voting system that you have put in place in many places around America. And that's not even the first time that they have blocked allowing people to check out the software beneath the hood. And once more, it says here, on August 26, 2005, Sequoia Voting Systems announced that Mr. Jack Blaine would serve as dual president between Smartmatic and Sequoia, which then became Dominion. It's almost as if there is a direct parallel there between the two of them, but somehow these fact checkers at Reuters, fact checking everywhere, must have missed that, must have slipped right through the cracks. It wouldn't be at all like they would just lie to you just to make their point more valid, right? They wouldn't do that. Here we have from Business Insider, Dominion Voting Systems tore into Sidney Powell's lawsuit, accusing it of a vast conspiracy, calling it baseless, senseless, and physically impossible. I highly doubt that that would be physically impossible, but we'll see here. Powell's lawsuit, which was peppered with typos, claimed that the president-elect Joe Biden's victory in Georgia is fraudulent and should be overturned because of physical and digital vote tampering. She accused Dominion Voting Systems of being one of two companies founded by foreign oligarchs and dictators to ensure computerized ballot stuffing and vote manipulation to whatever level was needed to make certain Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez never lost an election. Now, you'd think that would be kind of odd. That's something very it would seem very difficult to pull off. However, ask Hugo Chavez happened to have been elected 4 times in a row consecutively, and 3 of them being 6-year terms. Yet during these terms, there were many instances of uprising. In one case, a march leading to the presidential palace, as it's called in Venezuela, ended with 19 people being shot and 110 being injured. That's how badly he wanted to protect his crown, right? People just marching up to his facility, yet they get mowed down because he's the leader, right? He is the dictator. He is the tyrannical leader. And if you believe that to be anecdotal, ask a Venezuelan what they think of Hugo Chavez. And I am pretty sure you will have some very particular and specific answers to that question. Dominion Voting Systems said that the fact it was founded in Canada is a matter of public record, and it denied any connection to Venezuela or Chavez. So while that, once again, a truth at face value, however, we know from the previous part, Sequoia Voting System was purchased by this Canadian-found Dominion Voting System, another small company that not many people knew about. Just a little startup company for voting systems that happened to purchase this software and the voting machines themselves from Sequoia, but no connection to Venezuela at all. It also said the manipulation Powell described was not possible, not on a machine-by-machine basis, not by alleged hacking, and not by manipulating software, and not by imagined ways of sending votes to overseas locations, even though that is exactly what happens. Our votes are exported to different places, Germany, foreign places which I don't understand in the first place. That should never even be a possibility. That should be a constitutional law that our votes have to be counted in America. Why would we let other people count them for us? They also state, but even if it were possible, it would have been discovered in the statewide hand count of votes. Yes, so the statewide hand count of votes in Georgia that within the first 3 counties found thousands of missing ballots that weren't uploaded. Okay, possibly. I would say the first time, human error, maybe. Second time, a little weird, little suspicious. But 3 counties in a row in Georgia that find thousands of votes, primarily for Donald Trump. I'm getting a little suspicious there. And as they say, it's not even possible yet. In Michigan, you had, 6,000 votes magically switch from Trump to Biden? Little odd there, but then the 130,000 vote spike, where 0 of them went to Trump, also a bit odd. That seems like a flaw within the system themselves, which they later claim was human error once more, as they continue to throw their pawns under the bus, because that's just what they do, no accountability. And the problem with this primarily is that while yes, there may be a hand count of votes, many of these ballots did not have the outside envelope that needs to be signature checked as well. You have to have both the ballot and the outside envelope so that you can confirm that all of it checks out. Yet, since people were barred from being able to see, Republicans weren't able to watch, many of these envelopes were just thrown away and discarded. It says here, the company did not immediately respond to Business Insider's questions about whether it planned to write a rebuttal to charges in the Michigan case, which are similar, except much greater, so much higher of a discrepancy in Michigan. It's actually insane. You have some places where 300% of the registered population there voted. You have there are many counties where it ranges from 150% to the 300 that I previously mentioned, and yet I wonder why they didn't give a rebuttal to that. Maybe it is because they need to see the evidence that is provided first so that they can make their excuse, as they have done so far. Human error. There was an update on the day of election. We didn't know. Or what, in the one county in Georgia where the machines didn't even work for a few hours, so if you went in to vote, you weren't able to, and then you have work the next day, so it's like, well, I wasn't able to vote. Oh, well. You don't get those people back. You don't get those votes back. Powell was a prominent part of the Trump campaign's legal team, but it disowned her after she made claims similar to those of lawsuits at a press conference with Rudy Giuliani last week, as my as my Google Chrome goes out. And that is not true. They did not disown her. She no longer was a part of Trump's legal team, but the reasoning behind that, which is also speculative, is because they let Michael Flynn out. Michael Flynn was someone that Sidney Powell had previously represented, I believe. So there's a conflict of interest. So rather than taking the bad press head on, they just decided to say, no, she's not a part of the Trump legal team, as she still brings these lawsuits forth. 4D chess. So after having seen the sale of Smartmatic, I wanted to do a little bit more digging into that. And that's when I find this. Representative Carolyn B. Maloney, in 2007, when this was posted, she says, when I first raised concerns about the Smartmatic case with the U.S. Treasury Department, I knew it was ripe for CFI U.S. investigation. There were just too many questions and lingering doubts, which Smartmatic was clearly unable to overcome. At first, Smartmatic flatly refused to undergo a CFI U.S. review. It eventually agreed to a review, but later dropped out of the review process and announced its intent to divest of Sequoia. So, you're telling me that for the second time, once they've been called into question under review, this time they just decide to sell the company, the Sequoia company. And it happens to be purchased by Dominion, a small startup company for voting in Canada now. A different country somehow, just Canada. It's as if they're sort of moving their pieces along and putting them in different pinpointed locations so that they can say, oh no, it's the Canadians there, bud. They're the ones doing the counting. Yet, it's still, I would assume, I cannot confirm this because I guarantee Google is not allowing people to find the information, but I would assume Dominion has some pretty close ties to the same people who founded Smartmatic. And even if that weren't the case, the software that's being used, still, Smartmatic had created it. Sequoia, they're all so closely related that to state a fact check that they're not connected in any way, it really is just the Reuters and all these other fact checkers slapping the American people in the face, covering their eyes so that they can't see the truth, which is why I'm here to expose it. So if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.